Blue Eye Samurai is a Netflix adult animated action series created and written by husband and wife team Michael Green and Amber Noizumi. Set in Japan's Edo period, the 17th century, mixed-race swordmaster Mizu goes on a quest for vengeance against the four white men who illegally remain in Japan after the Tokugawa shogunate closed its borders to outsiders. For this video, we're going to be talking about one of the main four characters in this series called Akemi. Akemi's strong and positive character development in this short series caught me so off guard that I felt it deserved a video. In 8 episodes, I went from dismissing Akemi, to disliking Akemi, to feeling annoyed by Akemi, to finally caring for her well-being, and ultimately admiring her so much. When we are first properly introduced to Akemi in the very first episode, we come to learn that she's practicing talking points in the hopes of dissuading her father, a lord, from arranging for her to marry other suitable lords in Japan. Suitable meaning well off in this case, of course. We also learn that, contrary to what her father may want, that is Akemi's desire to marry Tegan, a samurai of the Shindo Dojo who comes from humble beginnings as a fisherman's son and who is her secret lover. Through this scene, we only learn a few things about Akemi's character and circumstances. First, that she is of a very noble and wealthy background, as her father is a lord, who, though is a traditional man, seems to favor and love his daughter, as he does give in to her requests in the end. 2. She has a close relationship with her tutor Seki, as he also tries to persuade Akemi's father behind the scenes to accept her wishes to marry Tegan. 3rd, we see Akemi display and assert manipulative qualities when she's prepared to do so and get what she wants from her father, as she strokes his ego, and also when she sleeps with Tegan. But we also see that she's very short-tempered and reactionary, which can go against her own good and her own wishes, or even her own attempts to manipulate people. 4. Her father also implies, and we can also see, that she is spoiled, and it is easy in the beginning to think of this of Akemi in the first few instances when we follow her. And lastly, 5. She hates it when men compare her to inanimate objects or animals, particularly pigs. Which, same girl, understandable, know your worth. You are not a prize to be won. After Tegan loses a duel and his hair, and therefore his honor, to Mizu, Tegan then visits Akemi to relay the news of his defeat and the loss of his honor, as well as to just bemoan his impeccably clean bald spot, as it means that her father would no longer accept their union. In her efforts to try to comfort Tegan and foolishly convince him and herself that they would still be able to marry, she sleeps with him in an attempt to manipulate him. Unfortunately, her efforts only motivate Tegan to abandon Akemi to chase after Mizu to restore his honor, despite Akemi's wishes. Akemi's father calls off their engagement, and he makes new arrangements for her to marry one of the sons of the shogun instead. She then brashly decides to chase after Tegan in the hopes of convincing him to return so they can marry, despite the stark and plain reality of the fact that her father, nor the Shindo Dojo, would accept Tegan as his failure stands. This is one of the first few examples where we can see that Akemi does seem to have the naivete of a young girl who has spent her life in silk robes, as her father has alluded to. It's also one of the first few instances where we see Akemi refuse to accept her circumstances. Here, it initially comes off as sheer stubbornness and idealism. Even her father figure, Seki, tries to convince her that it is a bad idea, as it would be dangerous to go around wandering Japan aimlessly searching for a man. But this advice falls on deaf ears, and he eventually decides to accompany her for her own protection and hopes of changing her mind. On the road, she learns the hard way that Seki is right when a gang of thieves robs them. Seki tries to hold the group off while Akemi runs away with her coin purse, but one of the female bandits spots her and chases after her. Now, this is one of the first moments where I felt the most frustrated with this character, because in all objective honesty, if it wasn't for Seki choosing to accompany and protect Akemi, Akemi would not have left this situation unscathed. She continuously and ignorantly ignores any sound and realistic advice that Seki gives her during the journey, and when she is confronted by one of the bandits and her coin purse is stolen, she childishly retaliates at the thief by throwing her shoe at her. The bandit tells Akemi, "You're lucky I'm not a man," and Yeah, she is. Because we don't need any in-show example to know what men are capable of in a reality where the criminal justice system is non-existent. When the bandit turns back to confront her, she's fearful, and when she smacks her in the face with her own corn purse, Akemi honestly seems astonished at the other woman would think to hit her. It's this level of delusion and idiocy when her betrothed was literally a samurai who has potentially killed at least 24 other people in battle, that first made me completely dismiss and actively despise her at the beginning of her arc. At the beginning. Anywho, later we see Akemi and Seki happen to come across a farmer with a horse-driven cart after their encounter with the bandits. Akemi gives the man one of her golden ornate hair sticks as a payment for riding as passengers at the rear of his cart. Now, my first thought here was that it was foolish to give the man gold before he even agreed, or most importantly, before she actually arrived at her intended destination, and that after almost being assaulted in a much more significant way that she actually was, she has literally learned nothing in the last hour. After some time, the pair arrive at a nondescript location where only a single hut stands, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, and Akemi identifies that the two are even further from their intended destination, Mihonoseki, than when they began their journey, having traveled in the wrong direction and left there swindled by the farmer. Seki reveals that he hid a remaining coin in order to get them back home to the palace, and she angrily rejects this plan, accusing Seki of never believing in her or in her endeavors because he had a plan B. At this point, seeing Akemi berate a man who genuinely cares for her and who is trying to implore her to see things from an objective and realistic standpoint regarding the social treatment of women at this time has become exhausting. I understand that at the time Akemi was fearful of marrying a stranger who may abuse her and I guess getting her teeth blackened, but this also goes to show by the same logic that Akemi has that she's refused to trust or believe that Seki would ever pair her with such a man and doom her to a life of abuse. Surely she should trust her father figure more than to think that he would allow something like that to happen to her. Akemi also does not even know Tegan as well as she thinks she does. In the very first episode that we see Tegan without Akemi, he's celebrating his engagement to her with his hands full of sake and his arms full of women, as if it were a pot of gold that he's won in a lottery rather than the beginning of a promising and happy life that he'll share with her. Tegan himself is not a trustworthy man at this particular point in time. Though we know and are shown later as the audience that Tegan does at least care for Akemi's life, this was never a guarantee. As stubborn as she has proven to be from the very beginning, Akemi yet again ignores Seki's words and finds a flesh trader, the Edo's period version of a pimp named Slickback, and manipulates him, an idiot, lucky for her, to take her to Minohoseki in her idiotic search for a man she has no way of convincing of coming back with her. She then decides to leave Seki behind and goes off on her journey to gain some much needed self-development. Again, due to her sheer luck, the flesh trader that she randomly happened upon actually listens to her for no real identifiable reason and doesn't sell her ass to the first or even third brothel that he engages with, simply because she claims we can do better. If this pimp was anything like the pimp we initially met in episode 1, a man like that wouldn't even have allowed her to utter a single word, and she would become abused anyway, when her number one goal, again, was to avoid exactly that. Towards the end of episode 4, I finally start to see Akemi in a new light, a positive light. She doesn't find Tegan, as she planned, but she's able to identify Mizu by her eyes and follows her into Madame Kaiji's house of pleasure, and gets herself sold off to the brothel there. She fails to bullshit an authentic bullshitter, Madame Kaiji, who never becomes so foolishly entranced by her pretty face and her poor naive lies regarding sex and men. Before Akemi can even get to Mizu, she is tested by another client who, unlike Mizu, is definitely not a gentleman. But this is one of the first instances in which we see Akemi put some of her skills to use in order to problem solve in her own unique way without having to pleasure the walrus. The first instance we ever see her demonstrate her tenacity and not receive any aid from anybody else in the dilemma. In this scene, I finally begin to take a step back and watch Akemi carefully with interest and wonder where her story may end rather than assume that I already knew the end of the story to a girl like her. Here, she finally shows promise to me as a character. Since Akemi has proven herself to the workers at the brothel, and no other worker has had the courage to attempt to render their services to Mizu after she requests to be left alone, Akemi takes her chance. Here, we are briefly reminded, yet again, that she is still foolish and immature. She thinks she can easily poison someone as keen as Mizu. I mean, of course she has no way of knowing that Mizu is not just any man, and she's not a man at all, and therefore her charm is not as effective as it may have been against other men. Mizu is sharp-witted, and she has not forgotten Akemi's face from the brief moment when they coincidentally spotted each other on the bridge in episode 1. At this point, Akemi still has not been properly challenged or learned any significant lesson to curb her recklessness, her stubbornness, and her lack of any significant foresight. She still cannot fully appreciate the danger of her actions and decisions when she makes them. Yet again, she manages to escape any real consequence or danger to her life due to luck. She is simply lucky that Mizu is not a wicked man and that she still holds empathy for others and doesn't feel the need to kill Akemi on the spot for 3 attacks against her. The first being when she tries to poison her, and the second when she tries to stab her because Mizu purposefully lies by claiming that she killed Tegan to anger Akemi, and the third when she tries to assault her again after being prompted to do so when Mizu sees through her ruse and when she strikes a nerve by spitting straight facts. Mizu says, Tegan, he was angrier at his hair than his marriage. Now, even Sword Daddy could see that Tegan was in fact more hurt over his wounded pride and loss of his lifestyle that he dreamt of having as a poor fisherman's son than really losing Akemi. Tegan's anger when he confronted Mizu had quite little to do with Akemi in all reality. Tegan gains more respect for Mizu, who literally shamed and disgraced him with minimal conversation and time spent in a matter of a few days. We are not sure how long exactly he's known Akemi for, but we know that he knows Akemi for far longer than he's known Mizu in the very least. And yet, it took absolutely no time at all for Tegan to become absolutely stricken by Mizu and their honor as a samurai. Well, you know what they say. Misogynistic men really only care about the opinion and admiration of other men, and that's why they see women as a prize to be won, so that they can show off to other men. The biggest turning point for Akemi's character, and my opinion of her, is during episode 5, when Hamata's men surround the brothel with the goal of slaughtering everyone. So far, we've seen Akemi continuously display her brash temperament and lack of any sense of self-preservation through her poorly thought-out decisions and seemingly single-minded blind focus on foolish and idealistic goals relative to how harsh her reality is. We've only seen Akemi display these negative personality traits in pursuit of the uncompelling goal of getting Tegan to return to Kyoto for her. In this episode, however, we see that Akemi's senselessness can also be a strength that lends her the confidence to selflessly aid Rigo and Mizu in the fight against numerous goons. Now, yeah, you could counter-argue and say, well, Brit, it isn't really selfless because if the goons die, then she'll be able to live. But she could also just leave it up to the 2 men in this situation and hide with the other women in the closet. She could try to cowardly beg for her life. She could just try to betray them. She could try to leave everybody else behind. But she does not. She's not just stubborn and headstrong in defiance of her father's wishes and commands. She also is stubborn and headstrong for other people's wishes, for the sake of others. She defies Madame Kaiji, who questions if she has a death wish, in order to help Mizu when she does not have to. And we can't just dismiss her bravery and her act of fearlessness because you can conclude that she has no idea of the possible dangers. That's not true. She's seen the number of men who stood against them outside the brothel doors. They've announced their intention to murk every single person in the brothel, which undoubtedly includes herself. And we all know that these guys are not messing around and they stand on own business because the very first thing they do is kill her former pimp before even descending on them. There is no doubt this time that she understands the risk here. And the risk here is a quick death at best. This line from Akemi, following everything that's happened, finally gives us a much needed insight and validation of what kind of person she really is at the core of her character. Akemi says, "I'm not brave. I've been a captive my whole life. If I die, I die free." The initial part of this sentence is actually untrue. Though Akemi lacks any basic survival instinct, she is not inherently fearless or careless in the face of harm or death. She is shocked to be struck in the face at the beginning of the journey, and is generally afraid of dying when she's faced by some of the clawed men when she seeks to find and help Mizu later on. And obviously, then and there, would not rather die in the name of freedom. She is significantly scared to die. She's scared to get hurt. Hell, we just started all of this with her because she was scared that she would end up in an abusive marriage if she was paired with a strange man. She is scared. But now we can fully see and appreciate that Akemi draws courage in her resolve to garner a sense of control over her life, no matter what she's scared of. This is why she is so stubborn in her decision, and why she's so defiant against people who question her actions, her wants, and her desires. She wants a say in her own life, despite whatever societal expectations and barriers faces her way. She's simply been tired of people imposing their own ideals and limitations on her future. So, yeah, no wonder she's desperately clung on to the idea of marrying Tegan. Whether or not he was a great choice, or a great man, or even if she might have loved him, he was most importantly a representation of a choice that she's made for herself, and she chose not to waver on that. She just wanted an aspect of her life to be her choice. After the battle's over, we have another kind of foolish moment from Akemi when, after being critically wounded, Mizu has just about single-handedly taken down a whole army of men herself. Two guardsmen for Akemi's father show up in order to take her back to the palace. Akemi again, with her lack of sense, fully expects Mizu to be able to take on another fight seconds after nearly dying several times herself. Akemi literally had to find Mizu and slap her awake so she could snap back into the fight from being so critically wounded. So yeah, just because she had this one instance where we start to feel very proud of her, it doesn't mean she's not still learning. So it's pretty realistic. One near-death experience is going to completely shake her core characterization. But yeah, clown behavior to expect Mizu to magically save her now. Especially after learning how she wants control over her own life. She can't depend then on Mizu or even Tegan anymore at this point to be able to give her the life she wants by fighting her battles for her against her father and his expectation of her as a noble daughter. So, this was a lesson that she had to learn, and she does learn at some point. After being captured and returned to the palace by her father's men, we see that she's experiencing a state of depression and has been contemplating SH to desperately escape her situation and impending marriage with the shogun's son. It was heart-wrenching to see how much her circumstances were affecting her mental health. It's hard not to have sympathy for Akemi in this moment, and her feelings as you watch how she falls into a deep, dark dismay, and she has to withstand the bullying of her handmaidens. We first see Seki again try to comfort and confront Akemi regarding her depression, and basically call her out for giving up before the battle even really truly starts. He continues to say that he did his best to raise her to persevere, to accomplish her goals. He's taught her tactical skills and she possesses enough intelligence to sort her own self out. Though he may not have been the best replacement or person for a mothering role, he earnestly loves her and he loved raising her. Though, given this little pep talk from Seki, she doesn't seem to change too much about her circumstances and how she feels in this moment. Next, we see whilst out on a ride around town in her royal cart that she spots Lady Kaiji and the rest of the women from the brothel in Mihonoseki, and then stops the cart to dash and speak to them. The women find out from Akemi that the royal wedding that has encouraged them to journey to Yoshirawa for more prosperous business is in fact Akemi's wedding, and that Madame Kaiji had her pegged right from the very start, and that she really is a goodness, an authentic princess. It is Madame Kaiju who gives Akemi the harsh advice that she honestly needed to hear to get through her hard-headedness. Madame Kaiji says to Akemi, "Stop running to and away from men and figure out what you want for your fucking self." Akemi responds that she wants control. We've heard her acknowledge this, and we've come to greatly understand this. Madame Kaji implores her to take it if she truly wants it. Though I can understand Akemi's feelings, she has ignorantly disregarded all advice and every word from everyone else this whole entire time on her journey. She assumes that the ladies wouldn't understand her position. She sees them as free, with a higher level of agency than her own. She sees herself as a caged bird, when in fact they are two different sides of the same social coin. What Akemi fails to acknowledge is that she in fact does benefit from the privilege of being a rich noble within a social structure that not only sees women as chattel and infants, but is of course also elitist. Though they are in the same position, since they are both women, or they're all women, the other women have nowhere close to the same social power that Akemi does and can possess. She assumes that Madame Kaiji and the other women don't understand, but she's the person who doesn't understand. Just because these women don't have to tie their life to a man through marriage does not mean they wouldn't understand what it feels like to fear and experience violence from beastly men. Smex workers often experience and have to stomach violent men and even women depending on how the head of their brothels operate. We know that Fowler has what it seems to be a long-established client relationship with Madame Kaiji and her brothel. And we know Fowler to be a disgusting, awful human being. Akemi has not the slightest idea of what any of these women have been through. She simply pities herself and her own circumstances so intensely that she is blind and unable to realistically think of others' hardships. Women don't tend to turn to Smeck's work because they possess true agency. True agency is to have options, and Smack work is never anyone's first pick or even first choice at all, usually under any circumstances. Again, we saw from the very beginning of the series that women have been sold into Smeck's work against their own will due to no action of their own except for unfortunately being born a girl into a poor family that needed the money. So, for her character to develop, she needed to be fucking for real with herself and with the world and stop with the endless self-pity. Finally, Akemi seems to have a revelation with this and a reignition of that fire in her that we've seen in her from the very beginning. That particular strength and bravery we saw during the night the brothel was attacked. She tries to demonstrate her resilience as the shogun's wife and her fiance's mother aims to unnerve her and shake her resolve through prepared special meals for Akemi during the celebratory dinner between the two families. One of those meals seemingly being the caged bird she was gifted for her engagement that she attempted to free, only for it to be killed shot by an arrow by her fiancé in front of her eyes. As her future mother-in-law's involvement was unbeknownst to her, due to her being told by this devious woman that this meal was all her husband's idea, she confronts her husband about it, believing him to be an awful man who glees in her torture, only to find out that he couldn't be any more different to her assumptions this entire time. When she discovers the truth, she finally begins to take the first steps in accepting her circumstances and making them work for her in what she wants so she can gain some control. She then gets rid of the awful handmaidens who were instructed by her awful mother-in-law to torment her, and then gathers Madame Kaiji and the other women to propose a deal for them to become her contracted new attendants to build a circle that she can trust. At last, she's not only acting confidently, but smartly. Unfortunately, this does not get to last very long, as it is revealed that there's a plot afoot to overthrow and annihilate her husband and his family by her father and his co-conspirators, Fowler and Hejishindo, which threatens the new life that she's just begun to accept and build for herself. In the aftermath of the battle between the group of men who meant to overthrow the shogun and Team Mizu, Akemi manages to escape the threat of violence with Seki. They both flee out past the main gates and away from the army of men in the fire that has been started and spread due to Mizu and Fowler's intense battle within the palace. They plan to leave to enjoy a new life together with the gold that Seki took from Akemi's father so they can finally be free and happy as father and daughter. However, Seki is unfortunately killed. This scene broke my heart. He was killed helping Akemi in her aim to do the right thing, the fearless thing, the brave thing that we have come to know her to do, and trap Fowler's men within the gates before they can escape themselves and wreak more havoc out into Japan. Of course, this loss is devastating to her. It's devastating to the audience to lose her only parental figure left, especially the parental figure that actually raised her, and the only father to show her how much he truly cared for what she wanted. With his dying breath, Saki tells Akemi that his favorite dream for Japan is to run ruled by her. He tries to go on and say more, but only the words, "I raised you to," were all that he managed to mutter before he slips away. After this, Tegan stumbles out to find Akemi as she kneels over Seki's body with her eyes full of tears. She tells Tegan about Seki's final wishes for her to live a free life, and Tegan offers to live that life with her since they serendipitously have found each other again in the end. Thank God Akemi turns Tegan down on his horrible offer, since he absolutely does not deserve her, because he has only had the tiniest iota of growth this whole TV show. She has long moved on from her original ambitions, and now has far bigger goals and desires outside of marrying Tegan and living a simply okay life. She wants to manifest Seki's dreams for her that he never got to see come to fruition. She wants to become great and make a real change, not just for herself, but for others. She finally has a goal, not driven by her own selfish ideals, and I am so excited for the animated show to get a second season. Not only so I can see what happens with our protagonist Mizu, but also so I can cheer on our princess Akemi.